You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 188. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast episode. If you are listening to this podcast the day that it goes live, it is Christmas Day 2024. If you're like me and you celebrate Christmas, I hope you are having a truly magical day with your family, your friends, your loved ones. I hope there's lots of Christmas cheer and Santa Claus and all of the things that make this holiday special for you. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, but you celebrate another holiday during this season, I would love to extend my most warm wishes to you as well for a magical season full of connection and love and joy with your families and your loved ones. And I hope for everybody, this is a time where you are able to take a step back and reflect on the year, reflect on your blessings, and to look ahead to 2025 and think about what it is that you would love to see happen next year. So big hugs to all of you. So much love to all of you and your families and your loved ones. It is truly one of those times where I think we all have a chance to step back for some amount of time and just really be grateful and connected to the people that we're close with. Now, this week's podcast episode is an invitation and a gift that I would invite each of you to give to yourself. This episode is a recording of one that I produced last year about choosing a word of the year. It's about choosing a word that is aspirational, right? What you would love for your year to look like. And also it's about choosing a word that may be a little bit uncomfortable that will help you to achieve your goal, that more aspirational goal. So I share in the podcast episode from last year that the word that I chose that is aspirational or was aspirational is the word grace. And I chose that word because I anticipated a somewhat challenging year, and the way that I wanted to experience the challenges that I saw ahead of me was by being calm and finding peace and trying to almost float above the fray when things got really difficult. And so that was the word that I chose. And to do that, I chose the word surrender, that it would mean accepting and letting go of some of the things that I thought should be a certain way, that maybe let go of things that I wanted or aligned with my values, my sense of what is right, in order to experience the grace, right? In order to not be bothered, in order to maintain peace, both internally for myself and also with others in my life. And so I did that this year. I kept to my word. I came back to it on many different occasions, and I did find that having that GPS, having grace as a goal for how I conducted myself, who I wanted to be in challenging situations, I found it really helpful. I found it was beautiful guidance. And to have this notion of surrender as a companion to that was also very helpful, because so often in those situations, that is exactly what I did. I let go. I surrendered to what is, what was, even when I didn't love it, in order to have the grace that I wanted to navigate my way through some pretty tricky situations. So that was my word for last year, or those were my words for last year. I shared those in the episode, and I would love for you to reflect on maybe the word that you chose for yourself. You may have chosen your own word or words of the year. And as you're listening, I would invite you to reflect on the words that you chose and what that meant for you, right? How you embodied those words over the course of the year, how they helped you navigate tricky situations, how they helped you navigate opportunities. So that is part of the reason, or part of what I'd like to share with you in terms of setting you up for the recording of this episode. Now, the other thing that I would love to share with you is that I have been reflecting on my words of the year for 2025, and I've chosen them, and I wanted to share those with you. The first word is the aspirational one, and the word I've chosen is breakthrough. Now, there were a number of different contenders that I toyed with over the course of the year, but breakthrough is one that is resonating very strongly with me right now. I have recorded a podcast episode about a breakthrough year. I've been talking about breakthrough years and some of the trainings that I've been doing recently. And to me, the reason that breakthrough is so appealing to me right now is that I feel like I have reached a point personally and professionally where I've been building a lot and growing a lot and developing in a number of different ways. And it almost feels like I'm reaching a point where it's time for a reorganization. Now, maybe this is a reflection of what's going on in our house that we live in, my family and me, because I have been decluttering like a crazy person and it feels amazing. There's nothing more satisfying than saying goodbye to things that are from a past life, right? That no longer serve you. One of my favorites was I was cleaning out the kitchen over the weekend and giving away or discarding food items that we just never consumed. And what was fascinating to me was that there were a number of products that were in the cupboard that I gave. Well, no, I didn't give them away. I actually went to give them away and then realized, wait a second, I can't even give this away because it's no longer consumable. These are things that were in the cupboard for such a long time that they expired, right? The date was 2023 or 2024. And so it kind of brought to mind for me the idea that sometimes we hold on to something thinking that we will consume it, right? That quince jam, that fig jam, the falafel mix, the chickpea powder. There were a bunch of things in there that I thought were a great idea that somehow we would consume them, and we never did. And I ended up having to throw a number of these items away. And it's so easy to do, right? Once the expiry date has come and gone, it's a lot harder to do when there's still that possibility of consuming it. So this is a little bit of a roundabout way of saying that I feel like I'm poised for a year where I would love for there to be profound shifts in how I choose to approach certain things. And I have some ideas in mind, personally, professionally, more in my approach to being, the strategies that I use, some of them that I may want to hold on to, some that I may want to let go of. But I'm ready for that more profound shift that I associate with a breakthrough. And if you've heard me talk about breakthrough recently, I'd like to look at the goal, right? The thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And then there's the breaking through part, right? The obstacle that you need to contend with in order to reach the goal. And so I'm really loving that concept right now. And so that is my word. I'm hoping that that will serve as a guide for me so that when I'm faced with decisions this year and I look at the different options that are available to me, I'm able to use breakthrough as a guide, a GPS, to help me choose which option is going to get me closer to that thing that I'm really craving at this stage of my life. Now, there is a companion word to that, as you'll hear about when you listen to the podcast recording. And that is the idea of what will I have to experience? What discomfort will I need to experience in order to have the breakthroughs that I'm seeking? And the word that came to mind for me, there were, again, a few contenders. I chose unanchored. I chose unanchored because whenever there is a true breakthrough, what I believe is happening is you're growing from where you are to where you want to go. And there's this awkward in-between stage where you're neither here nor there, right? You're no longer the person that you are currently or were, but you're not that person that you want to become. And so when you are in the middle, it's almost like you're kind of unsettled, you're kind of topsy-turvy, you may not know which direction is the right direction, you may be in a period of great uncertainty because you do not know the outcome, you cannot know the outcome, and it's going through that messy middle, that unanchored phase that will allow you to reach the other side. So I've used the analogy in recent episodes about being on one side of a body of water and you want to cross over to a shore across from you. And so you might step into the water, you might swim, you might take a boat and proceed in the direction of the opposite shore. And at a certain point, what you might find is that you no longer can see the shore you came from, but you also cannot see the shore that you are going to. And so you may feel a little bit lost. And that's where you need to really dig deep. You need to consult your inner GPS to guide you to get to that other side. So another example that might resonate with you is this idea of taking a leap of faith, right? I'm sure this has happened to you somewhere in your past, whether it's a professional leap of faith, a personal leap of faith, both of those things, right? It's almost where you make a decision that you're going to go for it with no guarantee of it being a success, but just knowing that you need to do it for whatever reason. You feel compelled to make that leap of faith and then trusting in the outcome, whatever that outcome is going to be. So again, going back to my word or words of the year for 2025, the aspirational word is breakthrough. And the thing that I think I will need to really allow for is this idea of being unanchored. I'm going to have to be comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable, right? That I will have to be accepting, maybe is a better way to describe it, that there will be this kind of messy middle, this unanchored feeling that I will go through if I want to have the breakthroughs that I'm really hoping for. So getting back to you, getting back to your family, getting back to the holidays, again, I just wish you all of the best. I really hope this episode gives you the gift of words that can be your GPS. I hope it helps you reflect on what will be a beautiful and meaningful and successful year for you. I hope you choose a word or two. And if you'd like to share those with me, please do. I would love to hear what you came up with. And with that, I'm going to share the recording and wish you a beautiful rest of 2024. And the next time you hear from me, we will be in that new year. So take really good care of yourself, take really good care of your loved ones, and I'll look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. Hello, my dear, dear friend. Welcome to the podcast and happy 2024. I think we're still allowed to say that. We are in week 2 of January 2024. And yes, the dust has settled. The holidays are behind us. The New Year's celebrations are behind us. If you've got school-aged kids, they are back in the classroom this week. And so it is still, I think, okay to wish everybody a happy new year and to help set you up for success this year by diving into one of my favorite New Year traditions, which is to set a word of the year. Now, if setting a word of the year is something that is new to you, then you are absolutely in the right place. But even if you typically do this, and even if you've already done this for the year, you're still in the right place because we're going to talk about the traditional approach to choosing a word of the year. And I'm also going to offer a little twist on that, which I think will help you to fully embody and encapsulate the word that you choose for yourself and increase your likelihood of achieving the kind of success that you want for yourself this year. Now, if this is new to you, then it may help for me to explain what choosing a word of the year typically involves. The usual process is that you think about something that you want to create in the year. It might be a goal that you have for yourself, a decision that you're looking to make, and you then set for yourself a vision of what kind of energy you want to possess in the pursuit of that goal. Or maybe it's a word that describes the process to you. And so typically you're picking something that is aspirational. You might pick the word decisive or courageous or determined or grounded or perseverant or elegant. So that is typically the process in a very quick summary of choosing a word of the year. And I've done this for the past 5 or 6 years, ever since I started my coaching practice, actually. And my daughter has also started doing this. So last year was her first year of picking a word of the year, and we're going through that process again for this year. And a conversation that she and I had the other day has inspired me to share this work with you and to offer a word of the year process that involves a twist. And the twist is counterintuitive and perhaps not what you would expect, but it stems from a conversation that we had about our words of the year. And we were there discussing things like perseverance and determination and elegance, words that are aspirational. And we were talking about how choosing such a word would really set the tone for the year ahead. And somehow we got into joking about words that we would never want to pick for a word of the year. Things like fear or anxiety or doubt. And it got us to thinking that would set a completely different train of events throughout the course of your year. And we kind of dropped the subject and moved on and started talking about other things. But the next day, I had this aha moment where I decided that actually picking a counterintuitive word of the year wasn't as crazy as it first sounded. And in fact, it can help you to achieve your aspirational word of the year. So stay tuned. I'm going to dive into that a little bit later in this podcast episode. First, we're going to focus on choosing your word of the year. So what do you normally do when you choose a word of the year? Well, it's a fairly simple process. Again, it goes back to thinking about what it is that you want to create this year and then picking a goal or a word that reflects that goal for you. Now, I've done this for several years, as I mentioned, so I'm going to share some examples of words of the year that I've picked in the past and invite you to think about how this relates to you and your practice and what word or words resonate with you. So one word that I chose for my practice, or for my year, I should say, very early in my coaching practice was the word decisive. I chose that word because what I found was that in starting my own coaching practice, I was all of a sudden faced with way more decisions than I ever faced when I was practicing as a lawyer, as an employee. So you can imagine I'd switched fields from law to coaching, and I'd gone from being employed where I received a paycheck every 2 weeks, it was very convenient, to having to build a practice from scratch. And there were a number of choices I need to make. And so I realized that being decisive was something I really needed to develop that year. Choices that I needed to make included, do I continue to practice as a lawyer while I'm building my coaching practice? Do I work in-house as a coach, or do I set up a business on my own? Do I keep my license as a lawyer after I had established my coaching practice? That was a decision I made maybe a year or so into my practice. And so there were a number of decisions that I needed to make. And to make those decisions, what I wanted to do was to embody decisiveness. That was my goal. That was my word for the year. Now, this is a word that you may be able to relate to. I work with a number of lawyers who come to me because they want help making a decision and executing on a decision. And you might find yourself at that stage where you are really struggling to make a choice. You're in the doldrums almost, where you're toying with one idea. Maybe you're in a job that you like, but you don't love. You are content, you're comfortable, but you don't see yourself being there 5 years from now. And so you might have this ongoing question, this decision that keeps floating to the surface that you keep kind of dismissing. And so you might decide that this is the year that you want to make a decision one way or another. Either you're going to accept where you are and love it for what it is, or you're going to make a choice to move on. You may be in a firm, for example, where you've got different options available to you. Some firms have, the up and out partner or find something else type of model. And increasingly, firms are offering alternative routes where you don't necessarily need to become a partner to stay in your firm for the longer term. And so you might be asking yourself whether partnership aligns with your goals, your professional career goals, and your life goals, or whether one of these alternative paths would be better suited for you. You might be in a law firm thinking about whether or not in-house would be an option for you, whether that's something that you would like to pursue. Or you may already be in-house and you're thinking about going to a different in-house position, or maybe even back into private practice. There are so many different choices that may be on your plate right now. And so decisiveness, making a decision, might be something that you want to make a goal for yourself, a theme for yourself over the course of the year. And of course, if you choose a word like decisive, it may be because you're looking to make one very significant decision. But what you'll find is when you set that goal, when you set that word, all of a sudden you become so much more attuned to all of the decisions that you're making, and you can develop that decision-making muscle as you go through your days. Now, another word that I chose in a previous year was resonance. This was a few years into my coaching practice, and what I started to notice was that there were things in my professional work that I found really fulfilling, where I felt a strong degree of resonance, and other aspects of my practice that I felt were not quite as aligned. And so resonance was the word that I chose for that year, because what I wanted to do was position myself so that I would increasingly work with the types of lawyers and clients that I really wanted to work with, and move myself away from some of the projects that I was working on that weren't quite as aligned with what I wanted to create. Now, this might resonate with you, because a lot of lawyers that I work with find they reach a point in their practice where they're no longer feeling fulfilled. They're no longer feeling connected to their colleagues, to their work, to their community. And so the exercise there becomes finding what resonates for you and taking active steps toward those things. So that might be a word that resonates for you in deciding on your word of the year for 2024. Another word that I chose was streamline. This was a couple of years ago, where I wanted to improve my systems. I wanted to streamline my processes. I also, again, wanted to move more toward things that resonated with me and let go of things that did not resonate. So that might align with you in your practice. You might find that you've just had a really intense year in 2023, that there was a lot going on, a lot of projects. You may have felt overwhelmed at times. You may have found that you were feeling burnt out toward the end of the year. Maybe you're feeling burnt out right now. And so by streamlining, you might be able to set a benchmark for yourself where you start asking yourself those questions. How can I do this more effectively? How can I build a team to support me? How can I develop systems so that this can be more smooth, more effective? How can I manage my days and my time better so that I'm more streamlined? So the word that I picked last year was magnetic, and that was a super fun word. You can tell there's kind of a theme here, right? The words that I'm picking are evolving as my professional work is evolving, and so your words too are going to evolve. The magnetic word for me was a choice because what I really wanted to do last year was attract into my world the types of lawyers that I really wanted to work with, the types of opportunities and projects that really aligned with what I wanted to do. And also, I wanted the magnetic component to apply to my personal life, right? To really attract to me the people who I wanted most in my personal life. And there is overlap for me in both of those areas. My personal and professional relationships are often one and the same. And so this focus on magnetic was really interesting, because what I found was I was able to do that. I was able to bring into my world so many incredible individuals, and I'm reflecting on it now and so grateful for that process, not only for the people, and there are some really amazing people that managed to find me, that I managed to find them, and also some of the projects that I was involved in that were really fulfilling. And so again, that might be a word that resonates with you. You might choose the word magnetic, thinking of how do you want to align yourself to bring in more of what you want, to have those opportunities flow to you organically because of who you're being as a professional. Now, that is the aspirational process, the aspirational part of choosing a word of the year. It's choosing a word that follows a theme, that allows you to reach a goal that you have set for yourself, that aligns with a vision that you've created. But there is a limit to the aspirational process, and that is this. When you choose a goal like that for yourself, when you choose a word, and then you find that you're not always able to encapsulate that word, and believe me, there were times where I was not streamlined, I was not decisive, I was not resonating, and I was not feeling magnetic, then sometimes that can leave you feeling like maybe something has gone wrong. You might then feel a little bit frustrated. You might feel a little bit of resistance. You might feel like you're failing at it. And sometimes you can give up on your word. And I mean, that makes sense, right? When we set a big goal and it's fresh and it's new and it's exciting and we've got all the endorphins keeping us activated and excited about a project, it's easy to stay connected to it. But once you hit June, if you're not really feeling that connection anymore, you can lose sight of your word and let it drift and kind of forget about it. And so what I'd invite you to think about is how you can approach this exercise in a way that will keep your connection to your word alive throughout the year. And this is where that conversation with my daughter comes back into play. The idea that you could actually pick a word that is something that you don't think that you would want to have in your practice, in your personal life, in your professional life, and yet by choosing a word like that, you can actually strengthen your commitment to your aspirational word and actually create something more than you would if you simply had that aspirational component to it. So what I'm going to do is offer a 2-step process to choosing your word of the year. And that first step is going to be the aspirational component. And that second step is going to be choosing a companion word. So let's go back to step 1, choosing a word of the year. So this is where I would invite you to think about the examples that I've just shared with you and think about goals that you've set for your practice. Now, if you are a listener to this podcast and you've been following for the last few weeks, chances are you've got some clarity around what it is that you want to create in 2024. A couple of weeks ago, I produced a podcast. It was a recording of a workshop that I did back in December about creating sustainable success in 2024. And that episode walks you through a process. If you haven't listened to it, by all means, go back and listen to it. Have a pen and paper handy because there are 10 prompts in that discussion that will help you to take inventory of what you achieved over 2023 and then set up a plan for yourself for 2024. Now, last week's episode was creating a business plan for lawyers, and I offer 5 different categories that you can use when setting up your business plan. So if you've done those 2 episodes, the work that is set out in those 2 episodes, you have a pretty clear idea now about what you want to do going forward into 2024. And so this is your invitation to pick a word of the year that can guide you in the execution of the plans that you've set for yourself. So think about what you want to do this year. This is thinking about goals that you have. Maybe it's a decision that you need to make. Maybe it's a challenge that you anticipate. Sometimes you can head into a year and your calendar is already full. You've got trials, you've got closings, you've got speaking engagements, you've got student recruitment, you've got travel plans. So you might look at your calendar and already think, how am I going to get all of this done? So you can already anticipate some of the challenges that you're having. You might be looking at your year ahead and thinking, you know what, there's something missing here. I know that I need to bring in more of something, whether that's bringing in more professional relationships. You feel a little bit lonely in your practice. Maybe you had a really busy year last year and you let some of your relationships slide. So this might be an opportunity to rekindle some of those connections. It might be a time to seek out new relationships. You might be wanting to bring in more marketing of your work. You might find that your practice is steady, but you want it to grow. And so you might want to do some proactive marketing to increase the flow of work that aligns with what it is that you're trying to create. You might find that there are other components that you want to bring into your life that have nothing to do with work. You might want more time with your family. You might want to travel to a far off destination. Maybe you haven't really done that since we've slowly eked our way out of the pandemic. So you might think about that quite strategically, and you might think about things that you want to let go of in your practice. If you find that you are overwhelmed, that there are committees that you've joined where you no longer understand why you're there. You said yes many years ago, and now you're still there thinking, wait a second, this no longer aligns with what I'm trying to accomplish in my practice. So this is your invitation to think about what you want in this calendar year in 2024. And then you would ask yourself what words come to mind when you think about those things. So I'm going to offer some words. Again, I encourage you to think of your own words. Go to the thesaurus, go to the dictionary, go to the internet and start Googling. I mean, you never know what you're going to find, but some of the words that I'd invite you to start thinking about that might percolate and resonate or give inspiration for other words might be determined, it might be decisive, courageous, persistent, grace, willing, abundant, magnetic, streamline, release, reinvent. These are all words that you might have as aspirational words that will help you to frame your actions, that'll give you that guiding light that you can follow when you are making choices and when you are conducting yourself day to day. Now, you can start by making a short list. You might narrow it down to 3 to 5 words that all kind of seem like they could work for you. And then from that list, I would invite you to pick the word that resonates the most strongly with you. And in a moment, I'm going to be sharing my word of the year with you, along with its companion word. So that was step 1, is to select your word. Now, step 2 is this twist that I've been talking about. It's the idea of choosing a companion word. Now, if we go back to that conversation with my daughter and the idea of picking a word like fear or doubt or anxiety and having that be your word of the year and imagining what your word would look like if that was the overarching theme, it does seem counterintuitive. Why would you ever want to set yourself up for an anxious or fearful year? And yet, I would offer that we do want to choose a companion word. When you pick an aspirational word, which is what you just did in that exercise, right? Whether it's courageous or elegant or determined, chances are there is a gap between where you are right now and where you see yourself when fully embodying that word. So, for example, if you're a really organized person, my guess is you're not going to pick organized as your word of the year because that's something that already is present in your life. There's not really much that is aspirational about that. There's not really any growth in that word for you. That being said, if you were to choose the word decisive as your word of the year, and you are presently in a decision fork, let's say that you are going back to that example of being in a job, right? You're in a job, it's okay, you don't love it, but you like it enough, and you know that it's comfortable, but you don't really see yourself there in the long run, then you have a decision ahead of you. Do you stay or do you go? And you can look at it from different options, but in order to make that decision, you're going to need to be decisive. And if you haven't made that decision yet, there's a reason. There's something that is holding you back. And it might be the fear of the unknown. It might be the fear of making the wrong decision. And what I'm offering here then is that when you pick your aspirational word and there's a gap between where you are now and where you want to be, there's something that stands in the way. And so we want to figure out what is standing in the way, and we can name that as your companion word because that's the work that you're going to be doing over the course of the year in order for you to fully encapsulate that aspirational word of the year. So again, let's go back to decisive as an example. If you choose to be decisive, if you choose to leave your job, even though it's comfortable, in order to try something that you think is going to be better for you in the long run, you are going to need to give up one job for another. You're going to need to give up something that is predictable in order to have the possibility of something better. You will need to take a risk without a guarantee of success. So you can see how in order to achieve decisiveness, you're going to have to go through something very uncomfortable. So going back to this process then, take that word that you've chosen for yourself, whether it's elegant or courage, determination, success. I mean, there's all these words that you may have chosen for yourself. So imagine what that word is, and then ask yourself what challenge is standing between you and fully embracing that word of the year. Now, I'll give you some examples. Again, this might help you figure out what word would be suitable for you. But let's think about this. So if decisive is the word that you want, that may mean that you need to embrace a willingness to fail. So the companion word that you might choose might be failure. You are going to choose to be decisive. And what that means is that you're going to have to embrace failure in your life, or at least the possibility of failure. If you choose determined, for example, that means that you're going to be determined and taking action toward a goal, regardless of whether or not you can see the success right away. So you might be needing to overcome feelings of self-doubt, right? You're determined to make it happen. You've never done it before. You may have a lot of self-doubt that comes along with that, and yet you're going to choose to move forward anyways. You might feel judgment if you're determined to do something and you're concerned about what others are going to think about you, especially if you're not successful. It may mean that being determined means a willingness to be judged. It may also mean that you need to develop a comfort with uncertainty. You're determined to make it happen, but you don't yet know what the plan is or what exact steps are going to be required. You're going to have to embrace uncertainty. So if your aspirational word is determined, then you might have to pick as a companion something like self-doubt, judgment, or uncertainty. So hopefully you're seeing how this game works and you're starting to have ideas for yourself of what kind of words come up for you as those limiting words. Another word, resonance. So if resonance is the aspirational word that you've chosen, there are companion words that go along with that, right? It's a willingness to let go, a willingness to follow your gut, a willingness to potentially be wrong. So think about what word would encapsulate almost the opposite of resonance, that thing that you need to overcome in order to fully embrace resonance as your word of the year. And then finally, the last example I'll share here is streamline. So if you choose a word streamline or something like it for your word of the year, what is it that is standing between you here today and that more streamlined version of yourself? It may mean that you need to be willing to feel loss, right? The loss of letting things go. It might mean feeling that fear of missing out, that FOMO. So you get to decide for yourself what it is that is going to come up for you as an obstacle in your journey to trying to embody your word of the year. So I mentioned that I was going to share my word of the year and its companion. And so the word that I chose for this year, there was actually a number of different contenders. I was first looking at the word elevate. This is a few months ago. I thought, oh, that would be a good word. Refine was another word that was on my list of contenders. Trim was another word, some sort of like streamline, kind of trimming the excess. Trust was another contender. Love was another contender. And the word that I'm almost certainly going to go ahead with this year, after going through a number of different options as described, is grace. And there are two reasons why I'm choosing the word grace this year. Number one is that I feel like in the last year, the last calendar year, there was more reactivity in my practice and in my life than I want to have, right? If there's a spectrum, I was a little bit more on the reactive side of the spectrum than is desired for me. And so part of my work this year then is to more fully encapsulate this notion of grace. And what that means to me is to be steady, to feel grounded, to be able to navigate myself with the ebbs and flows of practice and of life almost above the fray, right? That to me is what grace really means. And I feel like this is a year where I want to step into that feeling, to step into a more graceful way of practicing and way of being. And the other thing that I love about the word grace is that there's an element of grace that goes beyond what we can plan for, right? There's, as you know, I love planning. It gets me really excited. I love planning my days. I love planning podcasts. I love planning my year. I love planning trips. To me, there's so much satisfaction and joy that comes out of just sitting down and I want to use the word imaginating. I know it isn't an actual word, but it sounds so satisfying. Imaginating. I want to imaginate what I want my year to look like, what I want something to look like. Because I feel like imagine isn't enough. It's like imagination plus putting your imagination to a practical purpose, right? You actually turn the vision into reality. That to me is one of the most satisfying things that you can do. So getting back to grace, I know there's so much in my practice and in my life that I can orchestrate, that I can plan for, that I can effectively control through the method of planning. And yet there's this force in life, right? In practice and in life that is beyond what we can articulate and put down on paper as a plan, right? There's this idea that you put yourself out there and the things that you never could have planned for yourself will find you. They will find their way toward you. And sometimes those things that find their way toward you are exactly what you wanted. They're better than you ever could have dreamed of. And those elements of grace are so easy to accept and incorporate into your day to day, your life. And at the same time, there are aspects of your life that will also find you that are not as invited, right? These are the components of life where you didn't see it coming and you never would have wished it for yourself or for anybody else. And yet there it is. And it's something that you need to somehow manage. And so when I think of grace, it is the ability to have both of those components of your life, right? The unplanned, I'm thinking about the unplanned components of your life, some of which are magical in a positive way, and some of which are so challenging. And so for grace, for me in the year to come, it is being able to, number one, encapsulate that first definition of grace, right? To be able to navigate life with that sense of purpose and calm and ease. And at the same time, being able to accept the things that come my way in a fluid and flexible manner. So you might think about what word resonates with you that has some meaning for you in relation to how your last year has gone and what you want to create for the next year that's a little bit different for you. Now, I mentioned that the aspirational word, brings up something that is a challenge for you. And so when I think about grace and what challenge arises for me when I aspire to greater grace in my life, in my practice, I think it really is that notion of flexibility. It's that notion of maintaining composure when I really don't feel composed. And the words that came to me that would be the most challenging are accepting or allowing. And what I'm thinking about accepting is accepting those difficult parts, right? The really difficult parts that you don't see coming. The last minute changes, when things don't go your way, the difficulty of potential failure or actual failure. So it's inviting almost that fluidity, or inviting the unknown. And the word that I ultimately settled on, so I thought about accepting, inviting, welcoming, allowing. But to me, the word that resonates most strongly as the companion word is surrender, right? It's this idea that in order to fully embody the grace that I want to embody in my 2024 calendar year, it means I need to surrender. And so I'll have a chance over the course of the year to have that happen in action, where I'll be in the moment. And in order to choose grace, it means I'm going to have to surrender. And so you might think about for yourself, what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating, and what words would help you describe that? And of all of those words, which one is the one that resonates most strongly for you? So I feel pretty solid in my choice that grace is that aspirational word. And what that means is that I will need to surrender in ways that I don't even know yet. Maybe we'll revisit this at the end of 2024. I can maybe do a follow-up podcast and let you know how it unfolded for me. And by all means, please do share with me how this is unfolding for you. Let me know what words you choose, and let me know how it influences you over the course of the year. Now, one more note on that companion word is that I really invite you to explore some of the words that feel most difficult for you. Some of the words that came to mind for me while I was preparing for today: waste. That might be something that feels really uncomfortable for you. So maybe that's a word that you choose. Other common things that we often would love to just avoid: shame, failure, ridicule, judgment, scorn, and loneliness. And so these are all words that you can identify as companion words. And the reason for doing that, again, isn't because you want to have a year where all you do is endure judgment and scorn and shame from others. It's rather that when you can allow yourself to experience the difficulty, right? When you can invite that difficult experience, when you can allow for that, when you can surrender, then it creates a freedom for you in your practice, because you now know that in order to reach that aspirational word, in order for me to reach that grace that I'm looking for, it means I need to learn how to better manage surrendering. And so by developing the surrendering muscle for me, and for you, it will be something different. By developing that muscle, you move yourself closer to what it is that you are aspiring to. Now, the reason that this is an effective strategy is because when you are willing to choose difficulty, to allow for those difficult experiences as the cost of realizing your goals, then you gain the freedom to move forward no matter what it is that you're feeling. So, for example, let's say you choose the word freedom as your aspirational word of the year. And you decide that if you're going to reach toward freedom, the most difficult thing for you would be to feel trapped. And so you choose that as your companion word, that you're willing to feel trapped in order to find freedom. What you'll find is that instantly you already have greater freedom. And the freedom there is that you are now free from the dread, the resistance, the denial, or avoidance of feeling trapped, because you've already anticipated it and you've already allowed for it. And when you choose a companion word alongside your aspirational word, You're then better able to manage your expectations. You can normalize the difficulty that comes along with pursuing your goals, with trying to encapsulate that aspirational word. And you're able to anticipate some of the problems that you'll have ahead of time and then plan for them. And you don't need to embody your word of the year all of the time in order to get closer to it. And in fact, I think the opposite is almost true. The more time you spend in that companion word, the more time I spend surrendering, the easier it is and the closer I will get to that feeling of grace. So the skills that you'll need then to create your word of the year and its companion word are very, very simple. And the first thing, of course, is to reflect on what it is that you want for this year, for this calendar year of 2024. Then you're going to pick an aspirational word to help guide you. You can do that by writing out a list of words, narrowing down that list, and then picking the one that feels most connected for you, the one that resonates most strongly, that you feel engaged in and energized by. And then you're going to pick a companion word, one that is a word that maybe you think that you would want to avoid, that intuitively you would not pick as your word of the year. Maybe it's the complete opposite of the word that you picked. And you're going to embrace that word. You're going to make that part of your year's trajectory, because we already know ahead of time that you're going to have moments where everything goes your way and you're going to have moments where nothing seems right. And so we're already forecasting that and giving you the option of allowing that as part of your path toward reaching your goals. So when you choose your aspirational word and its companion, you've now set your GPS to signal that you're on the right path. And whether you are in your aspirational word energy, whether you're feeling elegant, whether you're feeling productive, whether you're feeling decisive, or if you're spending time in the companion word, right? Maybe it's you're feeling vulnerable, or you're feeling like you're close to failure, or you are failing, or you're feeling anxiety, or you're feeling that you need to surrender. That time that you spend in either of those emotional states, in either of those feeling states, you are still getting closer to where you want to be. And as you learn to manage the difficult components of your companion word, what you'll find is that you increase your strength, you increase your resilience, and you close that gap between where you are currently and where you want to be in relation to your aspirational word. So that, my friends, is what I have for you today. I hope that over the course of today's episode, you have managed to choose a word for yourself that inspires you and a companion word that allows you to weather through the more difficult parts of getting closer to where you want to be. And for all of you, I just wanted to thank you again for joining me in this podcast. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be able to serve in this way. If you enjoy this podcast, please do provide a rating and review. It helps me know that I'm on the right track. It helps other lawyers find this podcast. And so wherever it is that you're listening, I really would appreciate that this year. So my dear, dear friend, I hope you have now set yourself up and you're ready for 2024. And if you have any questions, or if you would like my support to help you this year with whatever it is that you are aspiring to, by all means, please do feel free to reach out. Bye for now. See you next week. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.